me just talk about a few of these news articles. So this is pretty amazing. I didn't know ATMs had this property. I knew that the payment cards at Kinko's have this property. When you have a payment card and you put money on the card, the number is just sitting on the card, and you can change the number and have more money. And I knew you could do that with Kinko's payment cards, but I thought banks were smarter than that, but apparently not. Diebold, which is the main ATM maker, they also make voting machines, and they had a vulnerability so you could modify the amount of money you deposit on your card. So that's pretty awesome. A deposit forgery attack. So they finally patched that. That's a good one. And this letter came out today from 70 senior national security officials saying Trump is unfit to lead for the usual very good reasons, and you shouldn't vote for him. And so this is the stuff which is more of what you expect, although it's kind of interesting to see how many Republicans finally speak out against him. And the answer is very, very few. But there are a few Republicans, mostly ones who have retired, that dare to say a word against Trump, because you might as well retire if you're going to say anything against Trump and you're a Republican, because 91% of Republicans support him, and so you'll lose your office immediately. But they talk about reasons why they think people should not trust Trump or support him or vote him back in. And the interesting thing about this is there are a large number of people that agree with it but refuse to sign this on the grounds that the last time they said this, Trump used it to raise money and raised more money because of this. Because his brand is that all the regular government people hate him, and the more they hate him, the more successful he is. So people say it probably makes things worse to publicly speak against him, which is kind of madness. But anyway, it is an interesting, strange time we live in, where sort of up is down and false is true and things like that. It is very hard to steer your course through such a tangled political situation. This one I didn't see coming. I mean, Trump's a complete crook. He ran a fake college. He ran a fake charity. He lied on his taxes. He ripped off his contractors. He ripped off the people that loaned him money and inflated his value of his banks. But I didn't know Bannon was too, and I didn't know he would get caught. Bannon's the mastermind behind Trump. He's actually the brains of the outfit. And he ran this thing to fund the wall. I heard about this. There were private donors donated this money to build the Mexico wall. And then I never heard any more about it. And what happened is they just stole the money. They just took the money after promising they were volunteers and wouldn't get paid, and gave $1 million to Bannon and like 200 grand to another guy. And now they've been arrested and they're going to be prosecuted for it. So that is pretty interesting. It kind of reminds me of Al Capone, where after all of his life of crime, he went down for tax evasion. And you know, it is a vagary of the legal system that the most egregious criminals often go down for financial crimes because you can prove financial crimes. And the laws are clear and the evidence is clear. So Uber and Lyft were going to end tonight or last night because California decided that you cannot have all these workers and not give them the benefits. They have to be treated as employees, not as contractors. But Lyft got a temporary stay of that. So, because they said it would take them at least a year to implement that, so they're going to end all Lyft and Uber in San Francisco, in California, I think, until that happens. But they've got a temporary stay, so they can continue to run their business the way it is now for a while. So we'll see what comes of that. And this one here, I thought was very interesting, and we're going to talk about quantum computing towards the end of this course. It is something that is not relevant right now, but it will become relevant soon. And the people developing quantum computers are making giant leaps forward. And so it begins you into the world of understanding quantum mechanics. If you have never studied quantum mechanics, it is mind-bending. It is almost a form of religion. And in quantum mechanics, you're asking what is reality and what is causality and things like that. Because there are things like quantum teleportation and quantum tunneling and quantum entanglement, where two objects are connected in some way that is very hard to understand. And anyway, what these guys claim they have now proven is that one of these three statements is wrong. There are three statements that everyone believes are true, and they have proven that these three cannot be done together. And here they are. The first is that when you measure something, you get an answer, and there's only one answer, and it means something. Instead of just instead of the universe splitting into multiple parallel universes as a result of your answer. The second one is that you can perform randomized trials. So you can repeat an experiment, controlling which variables you have changed. And which means, and the third one is that causality cannot move faster than light, which is the basis of Einstein's relativity. Let me try and mute some of the people here. Anyway, these are things, these three things are things that underlie all science and all physics and even perhaps all logic and morality, such as causality. And they claim that they are able to make a quantum mechanical measurement and prove that not all three of these things can be true. The one that I've certainly heard people talk about the most not being true is this one. A lot of people like the parallel worlds theory, where every time you make a decision, the universe splits into two universes and you move down one track and there is another track. It's one possible interpretation of quantum mechanics, and it seems like there would be no way to measure it, but people are in fact trying to find a way to measure it. So anyway, that's why I say you get into this really mind-bending science fiction-y stuff in quantum mechanics that sounds insane, but a lot of things are in fact possible with this very strange technology. Anyway, SSH on the Mac has a vulnerability. It's been there for years. I think this is how a couple of students stole all the passwords off my Mac a few times. You get extra credit if you steal my passwords. But anyway, you can get into files you're not supposed to get into just by SSHing locally. And the Mac forgets to enforce this security barrier if you're local. And I think we got another minute or two. This is, yeah, these ones here we're done with. All right, this is actually a very interesting issue. Why is the stock market hitting highs when we're locked in our homes, a bunch of people out of work, a bunch of people are going to get evicted and be homeless, many jobs are gone forever? It seems like a terrible economic time, but for the high-tech companies and the rich, it's an excellent economic time, and they're trying to explain why this happens. And I've heard a lot of people analyze this. The most convincing explanation I've heard, which seems to match this, is from Scott Calloway, and he says there's a lot of compulsive gamblers in the world, and now they can't get to Vegas and they can't bet on sports anymore, so they're betting on the stock market. So you have a bunch of idiots buying stocks who don't do any analysis or anything, and they're pushing the prices way up where they don't belong, because it is very hard to understand how stocks are more valuable in this time of crisis than they were before. Normally, uncertainty causes the market to go down. So anyway, we'll see what comes of it all. All right. So now we're up to the official time. So let me get down to 1:41. So here we are, and we got 22 people. Good. Looks like pretty much everybody found the class. So this is going to be cryptography for computer networks. And I want to make it clear that this is not really a math class. We are not going to be studying equations and proofs and rigorous mathematical analysis. What we're going to be doing is learning how to use cryptography. This is an engineering class. And I'm not so interested in developing new forms of cryptography. In fact, I rigidly recommend never doing that. What you need is you need the 10 smartest people on earth to write cryptographic systems, and all the rest of us need to just use them. If you try to make up your own, you will just humiliate yourself, because it's not easy. And you really have to be careful. But what people need to do is use it correctly. And it is amazing how rarely people use cryptography correctly. Even just using it seems to be too hard for people. And that's not too hard for us to learn. So I've got a wonderful book here. This is a guy who's invented the most modern systems, and he's very good. And I've got a whole lot of hands-on projects where you practice deploying cryptography and breaking into it. And so that's what we're going to do. So there is a Canvas course that goes along with this on the City College website. So you go to CCSF, and there's a Canvas here. And in here, you'll find that you are enrolled in 141 if you're an official City College student. Then you'll have 141 here. And when you go in here, you'll find that you can do, I should be able to get into student view and make it look more or less like what you would see. There. So all you're going to see here is announcements, then some quizzes, projects to turn in here, and there should be a discussion board someplace. It may not be here yet, but there will be a discussion board where you can do introductions. And so I'm going to have, that's what your points come, that's what your grade comes from. There's hands-on projects you do, where you turn in screenshots. There's quizzes and a discussion board. And so you have to turn in discussions on the discussion board and quizzes and projects. That adds up, and a final exam that adds up to your grade. So you turn those things in Canvas, but the projects are on my website. I didn't bother importing them into Canvas because I need better control over them. But here they are. So there's a whole series of projects to solve, and I'll demonstrate a few of them later tonight. So this is what most students value most in the course, is the hands-on projects where you really do stuff. So I understand that that's what most people do. And there's always a lot of extra points here, so you can ignore other parts of the course and just do more projects. And that is one popular way to succeed in my courses. Anyway, that's that stuff. And let me see if I had, there's a grading statement down here someplace. Yeah, there it is. All right, and I've got to add the discussions to this, so this total is not quite right. But anyway, there's a bunch of points, 90%'s an A, 80%'s a B, and so on. So I'll update this. But it's the same as all my other courses, and it's a very simple procedure. One thing I ought to mention, there is no curve. In Britain, everybody is freaking out because they curve the grades and move people down 3-letter grades. If everybody gets 90%, they all get an A. I mean, I see this as just like a certification exam or the military. There's just a standard, and I just want you to reach the standard. I don't see why, if more people reach the standard, I should make it harder. It's not a race to see who wins. It's just to see if you learn a sufficient amount. So anyway, all right, I guess there's that. And today, rather than start with the first chapter, I just wanted to talk a bit about cryptocurrencies. I don't know if they're as fashionable and exciting as they used to be, but they're still big and they're still funding a lot of modern cryptographic research. There is a large belief among a large number of people that these cryptocurrencies are wonderful and they're going to save the world. It is essentially a religion. As far as I can tell, it has no real basis in reality, but an enormous number of people believe this, and they're spending an enormous amount of money developing very sophisticated cryptographic structures for these cryptocurrencies, and that is funding a lot of development. So this stuff I'm going to show you tonight is there's Digital Gold explains how Bitcoin was created and why, and then Attack of the 50-Foot Blockchain is a deconstruction for David Gerard, which is wonderful, explaining from a financial professional's point of view, how this is a complete waste of time. And that's how you have the modern world is very strange. There's a culture of cryptocurrency enthusiasts that are, some of them are very rich, all of them are very, very enthusiastic. They form a sort of little religion. They all believe that they're saving the world, and they have endless complicated derivatives and financial objects based on these. And all the major banks and credit card companies just laugh at them. The Fed chairman and everyone says, these people are like little children pretending to run a bank with fake monopoly money. The total amount of money involved is very small. There's an incredible amount of fraud. They don't even obey any of the rules, and it's very strange. And they're trying to make these cryptocurrencies acceptable in the mainstream with very little success. But anyway, so, all right, you know who I am. And so this, you know what class you're in. All right. And I got some CryptoKitties, which I'll talk about. I think they're gone now, but these were the most popular thing on the Ethereum blockchain for about a year. And they demonstrate very nicely the good part and the bad part of Ethereum, so I'll talk about them. Anyway, so the fundamental data structure here is a blockchain, and that's why cryptocurrencies are worth knowing a little bit about, even if you don't plan on using them, because they involve a lot of sophisticated cryptography. So let me start with this video to understand the blockchain in 2 minutes. A student showed me this one, and I thought it was very nice. So it should be one of these. 2 minutes. There we are. Okay. So I'll play it.
When you vote, have you ever wondered whether your ballot is actually counted? If you meet someone online, how do you know they're who they say they are? When you buy coffee that's labeled fair trade, what makes you so certain of its origin? To be sure, really sure, about any of those questions, you'd need a system where records could be stored, facts could be verified by anyone, and security is guaranteed. That way, no one could cheat the system by editing records, because everyone using the system would be watching. Systems like this are on the horizon, and the software that powers them is called a blockchain. Blockchains store information across a network of personal computers, making them not just decentralized, but distributed. This means no central company or person owns the system. yet everyone can use it and help run it. This is important because it means it's difficult for any one person to take down the network or corrupt it. The people who run the system use their computer to hold bundles of records submitted by others, known as blocks, in a chronological chain. The blockchain uses a form of math called cryptography to ensure that records can't be counterfeited or changed by anyone else. You've probably heard of the blockchain's first killer app, a form of digital cash called Bitcoin that you can send to anyone, even a complete stranger. Bitcoin is different from credit cards, PayPal, or other ways to send money because there isn't a bank or financial middleman involved. Instead, people from all over the world help move the digital money by validating others' Bitcoin transactions with their personal computers, earning a small fee in the process. Bitcoin uses the blockchain by tracking records of ownership over this digital cash, so only one person can be the owner at a time and the cash can't be spent twice, like counterfeit money in the physical world can. But Bitcoin is just the beginning for blockchains. In the future, blockchains that manage and verify online data could enable us to launch companies that are entirely run by algorithms, making self-driving cars safer, help us protect our online identities, and even track the billions of devices on the Internet of Things. These innovations will change our lives forever, and it's all just beginning.
All right. I really like this video because it shows the good and the bad side of this right away. Notice how many lies there are. And basically everything they said is a lie. Now, there is a thing called a blockchain, and we're going to use it. But how can it have the property of protecting your anonymity and then telling you whether something is genuine at the same time? This makes no sense at all. How is it going to drive your car? That is just gibberish. And there is a transaction fee, and there are ways to double spend. And, it's just everything you've heard is boosterism from someone who wants you to invest, and they're trying to sweep all the dirt under the rug. So anyway, so let's take a look at this live blockchain demo. And I've got this linked in one of the projects. If you want to completely ignore blockchains, you're free to do that in this course. I made it extra credit to do the blockchain projects. But that's what I'll show you tonight, and then we'll get to the stuff in the textbook next time. So I put them at the end of the list, and I'm making them extra credit because blockchains are people are less excited than they used to be. But anyway, it's good to understand how they work. So here's a simple online demo. Here's 3 blocks in a simple little blockchain. So here's a block of data, and you put data in here like Sam has 10 coins. And then you put data here like Sam gives Joe 3 coins. And you put data here like Joe gives Sally 1 coin. All right. So that's, let me see if I can figure out. There we are. All right, I think I got it. All right, so these are data blocks, and when they turn red, they have not been mined. Somebody has to mine it. Now, the way you mine it is you have a part of it you can vary called a nonce, and it just tries random nonce values until the hash of this whole thing starts with a certain number of zeros. So you calculate a hash, and in Bitcoin, it is SHA-256 of SHA-256 for some reason. So you just use a hash function, which creates an essentially random number, and you try it over and over and over again, millions of times, until you get a hash that starts with a certain number of zeros called the difficulty factor. So now this block has been mined, and you take this hash value and include it in the next block. So this 1562 goes over here, 1562, and then you mine this one, and it'll turn green when you find a hash that starts with a lot of zeros here. Yes, okay. And then that hash, 1132, goes here, and you mine this one, and that is the blockchain. You have blocks of data, and if somebody tries to modify something, like Sam tries to have 20 coins back here, then this block turns red. It's no longer matching the hash. The hash doesn't start with a bunch of zeros. So this block is broken, and this block is broken, and this block is broken. So if you find a blockchain, then it's very easy to verify that it is intact. All you need is that the latest block has the correct value, and that it matches when you recalculate it, that proves that all the blocks up to this point are the same. So the point of a blockchain is it is a data structure that is shared among many people, and everyone has write access to write data into it, but nobody can ever change the history. So there are certain things this is good for, like a financial ledger, keeping track of your bank balance, or a event log, recording what happened, or a series of events for which there is a contract, a legal contract, like I have suppliers, and they promise they're going to deliver components to me by a certain date. And if they don't, there will be a penalty. So I want a record of what did you agree, when did you ship it, when did it arrive, when did I pay you, and so on. These kind of data structures are appropriate for a blockchain. All right. Anyway, so that's a simple blockchain. And I've got this project you can go through, and when you calculate a certain blockchain, you'll see a flag here. This is the first flag. So when you find a flag, you can collect points by turning in this image. You take a full screen image with this, and you type the flag value into Canvas. You go into Canvas and find this H530 project, and there'll be a place to submit your project. Here's a challenge, and I see I've got old numbers here. I'll have to fix that. Anyway, yeah, the block they're down here. So here we can do a real Coinbase, and that's the next one. If you take this thing, this is the blockchain. Here is the Coinbase. This is a little bit more like the real Bitcoin blockchain. So you have a certain amount of money created with every block. And now the first one initiates the currency. You issue the currency. So this issues $100 to Anders. And this one, people now, Anders starts spending money, sends $10 to Sophia and $20 to Lucas and so on. These are the transactions. And this one, all these people can now trade money back and forth. But the way this works is if I were to start with, say, this went to Sally instead, something like that. Then when this one gets mined, the person who mines it, there are many different people competing to mine, and whoever mines it, they win the award. So it might be that Sally mined it, and now that means Sally gets this payment. And so now when this one gets mined, whoever finds the right hash value that has enough zeros in it first wins the race, and they become the miner and they get paid. And this is what motivates them to spend their money and build a computer cluster and mine faster and faster. The whole world of Bitcoin miners is a race, and whoever wins the race makes money, and it is a lot of money. So that's what powers it. And the result is the Bitcoin blockchain is considered very secure because the financial reward of running fast computers to mine it is greater than the financial reward of running fast computers to cheat. Now, if that were not true, for example, if the reward of mining were too small, then you could run a computer so fast that you find a mining solution and you don't tell anybody else, and then you find the next mining solution, and then you announce this one later. So you're still ahead of people, so they all lose the race, and now you've already calculated the next one, so they're going to lose the next race too. So if your computer is quite a bit faster than everybody else's, you can just trick them all into losing every race, and you can sweep in all the money. You could even start cheating. You could falsely mine blocks that contain lies, and other people wouldn't have a chance to verify them before they were approved. And you could take a block that hasn't been publicly mined yet, and you could take the coins there and do a double spend, and people would give you the goods before they discovered in later blocks that you had tricked them. So that's why the whole security of the system relies on these miners. The fastest computers in the world have to do honest mining. If there are faster computers trying to cheat, they can foul up the system. All right, anyway, that's what makes Bitcoin as secure as it is. And in practice, Bitcoin is quite secure, at least against that kind of attack called a 51% attack, where one person controls half the miners and then they can lie. So that's Bitcoin. Now, Bitcoin itself is not very attractive. The only actual application of Bitcoin is money laundering. If you want to do something illegal, then you use Bitcoin, like ransomware. There is no actual reason why a normal human being would own any Bitcoin or invest in it. So when I heard about this 5 years ago, I thought the funny thing is that you lose all your money. This is the normal experience of anyone in Bitcoin. You go to some place like Mt. Gox, you buy some, they collapse and steal your money. That's normally what happens. But I later learned that there are many, many more financial scams going on Bitcoin. But here's the killer apps, and they're all crime. The original killer app for Bitcoin was Silk Road. You could buy heroin and guns and prostitutes. And then ransomware is the big one. And then it turned out that there are nations like Argentina where their actual official currency is so terrible because their economy has been destroyed by bad government that in fact it is better to put their money in Bitcoin than to put it in their local currency. And that creates a demand for it. All of these are money laundering. In Argentina, it's illegal to put your money in other currency, so you're sneaking it into there. The point is all these, the reason why anybody would use Bitcoin is because they are trying to avoid the legal restrictions on money for one way or another. But of course, in 2017, Bitcoin started rising so fast that people bought it as an investment, hoping it would keep going up. And for a while, it went up very fast. But anyway, there was an incredible amount of fraud. Mt. Gox was the first big Bitcoin exchange, and it lost 7% of all the Bitcoins in the world were stolen, either by the owner or by other people. This guy here. And then Hong Kong exchange got hacked, and Bitfinex got hacked, and Bitstamp got hacked, and there were a bunch of pyramid schemes, and a bunch of these others went down all over the world. It's just amazing how many of them got hacked and crashed and stolen and lost the money. And then when they raided Silk Road, one of the Secret Service agents found the Bitcoin and stole it, and then he went to prison. It's just amazing how this stuff is connected to crime. But here was the price history. It was originally Bitcoin was worth nothing. In the early days, it was just a mathematical curiosity among a few people playing with cryptography and computers. And then it started going up because of Silk Road. There was a way to actually buy something. And then for some completely unknown reason, in 2017, everybody started bidding the price up, and it went up by an incredible amount in 1 year, all based on nothing. I went up to about $20,000. I remember my students were buying it at this time. I had a student buying it at $8,000. And I said, man, I wouldn't buy that stuff, but he did. And boy, I hope he sold it fast because it didn't stay up there for long. But anyway, so then it crashed and settling down. But the stodgy financial professionals learned the rules I learned in economics, and I've done some financial work. You calculate things by a price to earnings ratio, and Bitcoin has no actual value. There is no reason for its value to be anything other than zero. So there is no reason why it's 100 and then it's 1,000 and then it's 10,000 and then it's 20,000, then it crashes to 300. It's very unsafe to invest in for that reason. There is no actual basis for this. It's just blowing around like a piece of paper in the wind. So anyway, here's the Bitcoin bubble. And what's interesting here is Bitcoin rose faster than the dot-com bubble. This is the dot-com bubble around 1999 to 2000 when everybody jumped on the internet and their stocks went way up, and Bitcoin is much faster. So you could argue that Bitcoin represents a form of human stupidity that we have not seen in 400 years. This is in comparative money. The last thing that's happened was the tulip bubble. This is the Bitcoin bubble, and the blue one is the tulip mania. There was a country in Europe that did not have tulips, and somebody brought in some tulip bulbs and they started selling them. So there was this new flower, and then people started just trading. The price went up and up and up incredibly fast to where people were paying the equivalent of the house cost of a mansion, like millions of dollars for one tulip bulb briefly. So everybody started buying it because it was going up. But in fact, there was no basis whatever for it really having that value. So it went up and up and up and then crashed like mad. And Bitcoin did the same thing, although it didn't go all the way down to zero, but it went down quite a lot from the high. And so anyway, that's people do buy things just because they're going up, but if there's no good reason for them to be going up, then they usually lose all their money, unless they are lucky enough to choose the right time to get out. And there's another fundamental flaw. If you think about what's going on here, you have thousands of people mining. That means your every single calculation required to perform a transaction is about 1 million times slower than it should be. Now, if you have something like Visa, you have a central company with one copy of the database, and they might have some backups or something. But when you spend money on a Visa card, they change a financial account in one ledger. But in Bitcoin, they change it in thousands of ledgers, and each one of them does millions of extra computations trying to find that hash value. So you've made a computer that is a million times slower than it needs to be. And that means it runs very slowly, just a few transactions per second, but Visa runs at thousands of transactions per second. So every time you try to actually do any real global scale business on cryptocurrencies, the blockchains just crash and you can't do it because they're all fantastically too slow and too expensive. Now, I see there's some chat messages. Let me see if I can find them. Chat messages. People lose audio? Bad acoustics? Oh, can you hear me now? That's not right. Audio is flickering.
You're coming through clearly on my end.
Oh, all right, good. Okay, fair enough. People say they can hear me fine. Okay, it may be other people's internet or something. Anyway, how can PE ratio be 0? Well, a PE ratio is technically infinite. But of course, this happened. Yahoo was the first one. Yahoo was the first internet company that put out stock and they were losing money. And they just kept on losing money and putting out the stock, and all the standard financial people freaked out and said, how can we calculate the right stock price? The right stock price is supposed to be 20 times earnings or 30 times earnings. But if you're losing money, what are you selling stock for at all? You should be out of business. And yet Yahoo did go up. And so in the modern world, the internet companies have a simple business model, which is very common, which is you put out a product, you give it away for free, you lose money on it, you burn through your investment capital, and you try to get Google to buy you before you go broke. And that's your business model. So really, you are not a real company. You are just a prototype, lost leader, demonstrating proof of concept, and you leave it to somebody else like Facebook or Google to actually figure out how to put ads in it and make money. You don't have to have that at first. So that's one, but I mean, that's a temporary situation when you're not making any money. Anyway, but these blockchains suffer from a lack. They're a solution in search of a problem. There is no known problem for which a blockchain is a good solution. They make up these science fiction stories about how if you don't trust anybody and everybody is cheating, then a blockchain will solve that. But there are no actual practical applications for this yet. But an incredible number of people believe that it's going to be the next internet or something, and that they're throwing endless amounts of investment into it, thinking it's going to be awesome. So they tried to say Bitcoin is a means of exchange, and they tried putting Bitcoin payments in battery. And they tried putting it in like a Subway and selling food with Bitcoins and such, and it turned out to be too slow and too unreliable and too expensive. So that didn't work. And other people say you can save your money in Bitcoin and it'll preserve your money like gold, but it crashes every quarter by 30 or 50% or more. It has huge price fluctuations. So that violates the concept that it's really a store of value. Gold is the classic store of value. All my life, my father always used to say, if you want to preserve your money, you put it in gold, because no matter what happens, the gold is always worth something. That's the point of gold. Gold changes in value, but it never falls to zero, and it doesn't change very fast because it's just plain gold. And people generally regard it as valuable regardless of the state of the stock market or anything. Initial coin offerings are where you print your own money. I don't know how it's legal in America. You just issue your own currency and sell it, and then people buy it. And an incredible number of them just go broke immediately afterwards. They're essentially just Ponzi schemes. They're pump and dump schemes and so on. And so anyway, this is cryptocurrency. You're running off the edge of a ledge, and you don't fall for a little while because you don't notice you're going to fall. And then you realize you put your money on something and there's really nothing holding it up. So anyway, here's another fun fact. One of the fundamental principles of Bitcoin is nobody should control it. They said, we want to get away from, say, the US dollar. The United States government prints the dollar. United States government can choose to print more money like they're doing now and dilute the value of the dollar. They can choose to adjust it with the Fed and so on. There's all these government agencies messing with the money supply, and Bitcoin is supposed to be independent of all government agencies, so no government can control it. But what happened is Bitcoin was designed to where the mining depends entirely on CPU speed. So the only way to be fast is to have computers with special ASICs, automated special circuits just to do Bitcoin mining, and you need to find a source of a vast amount of cheap electricity. And China has a system where you can just bribe someone near you and get free electricity. So almost all the Bitcoin is mined in China, and almost all of it is controlled by 10 people who own mining pools. So it has absolutely failed to distribute the mining all over the world. In fact, the government of China could completely control Bitcoin at any time, at least up to a couple of years ago. And I think probably, again, because for a while China said we're going to outlaw Bitcoin, and now they say they're going to officially embrace it and even declare a national cryptocurrency. So like America, the authorities can't quite figure out what to do. And they waver between trying to outlaw it and get rid of it, or trying to embrace it, or trying to control it and build it into the system. And they're all just sort of confused what to do, like they're confused what to do with other disruptive things like Uber and Lyft. They splash into your economy, they start doing stuff, and you don't know if they're legal or not, or how you should tax them or how you should regulate them, because they're something new. But anyway, the Chinese government certainly could manipulate Bitcoin extremely if they wanted to. So far, they have not apparently wanted to. But this one got a lot of attention around the end of 2018. People noticed how rapidly the power consumption of all the Bitcoin minings was going up to where it was now like 1.1% of all the electricity in the world was being spent doing Bitcoin mining. And I've seen so many bubbles like this, where something is going up for a couple of years and everyone freaks out. So some people started publishing this prediction that by the year 2022, Bitcoin was going to consume all the power in the world, because they took the data from 2015 to 2018, and they extrapolated it out a few years, and here's the entire total electricity in the world. So by 2022, it'll be, and I said, this is ridiculous. We've been through this with the internet bubble and the tulip bubble and everything. When things go up this fast, that is not a trend you can extrapolate. That is a brief jerk, and then of course it will come down again. It's ridiculous that things go up that fast. They only go up that fast because it was very small, and it's going from nothing to a little bit. Nothing goes from a little bit to a lot at that pace. So I made this graph and published it to try to make a joke out of this. If you extrapolate this a little further, then you'll consume the entire energy in the sun by 2060, and all the energy in the galaxy by 2080, and the entire universe's mass energy before 2100. So the entire universe will be nothing but Bitcoin mining by 2100. And what's funny is I thought that this was ridiculous enough that people would rebel and realize, obviously, you have to stop extrapolating from this kind of data. But a bunch of people said, oh my God, I'm afraid it's going to end the world. And I'm like, the point was to show how ridiculous this is. None of this happened. Of course, shortly after this, it just crashed and stopped growing so fast, which is what happens when things are going up really fast. That means they're in a temporary transition and they will hit some kind of limit. Anyway, so Ethereum is the second cryptocurrency of importance. And this one was intended not just to keep track of financial transactions, but you can have a program that runs on the blockchain. So now, not content to run databases and make them cost 1 million times as much per transaction with the CPU, you now want to make 1 million copies of all the memory of your program as it goes ahead, which is now you're multiplying the RAM requirements by 1 million as well. But anyway, people wrote it, you can do it. And they said the point of the Ethereum blockchain is you can now have a contract which will run on the blockchain. And the idea was you have now distributed government. So the prototype was going to be the DAO, the Digital Autonomous Organization. This was going to be a company that lived on the Ethereum blockchain, run by a computer program, so there was no human running it. It did not live in any country. It was not subject to any laws, and nobody could shut it down. You would just launch it. It would run on the blockchain, and it had rules where you could invest money, and then people could make proposals, and people could vote on the proposals. And if they got enough votes, then they would be funded, and then they had to pay the money back with interest, and you'd have a sort of investment bank kind of running on the blockchain beyond all human control. But that's the game. And the point was, they said there are two sets of documents for the DAO. The first one is the actual code that runs the DAO, which is public on GitHub. Anybody can look at it. And they say, before you invest, it is your obligation to audit the code, because we also have PDF files and PowerPoint shows and stuff explaining how the DAO works to motivate people to invest, but those might be inaccurate. When you really invest, what you're really investing in is that code. And if you don't audit the code, then and some of these promotional materials are shown to be wrong, that's your fault. You didn't do your due diligence. Now, of course, how many people can actually audit code? Very few people. How many people buy something just because they see it going up, and is almost everybody buys it just because it's they see it going up. So what happened is a bunch of people invested $150 million into the DAO, and there was a bug in the DAO. So a hacker stole half the money immediately. And then everybody freaked out and said, you got to roll back the blockchain, canceling the last month of transactions, so we'll undo that theft. And the hacker said, wait a minute, this is garbage. I am not a hacker. I am not a criminal. It said right here, you're investing in the code. I looked at the code. I found out how to make the money. And so obeying the code, I am an intelligent investor, winning honestly, according to the rules you set up. You can't call me a hacker and you can't take my money back. So they had the argument, how to proceed, and they rolled the Ethereum blockchain back by a month. Now, the idea was they would undo all the transactions for a month and start over. But the whole point is it's decentralized. So if they do that, they create a new Ether. The old Ether still exists unless all the miners would agree to quit. Now, what happened is 90% of the miners moved over to the new Ether blockchain where that hack never happened. And they started mining that chain. And since most of the miners had gone over here, the value of the old Ether fell down to a small fraction, like 10% of its previous value. But there were almost no miners left. So it was in fact much easier to mine this. So a bunch of miners continued to mine the old Ethereum because they could make money that way. And they both moved forward. So now there are two flavors of Ether. And they are mathematically identical up to a certain point, and then they diverge from that point. So everybody that owned Ethereum before the fork, they own both sides, and both sides independently move forward like currency from different nations. Now, the original reason why everyone resisted this is they thought that rolling back the chain and forking the chain would cause people to lose faith in the currency and say this is nonsense, and the whole thing would collapse. But that did not happen. And to be fair, the London Stock Exchange did the same thing. Every time I try to be real mean to cryptocurrencies and say they're nonsense, the people that defend them say, well, the other kind of currency we're using is nonsense too. And unfortunately, they're kind of right. Microsoft wanted to run, Microsoft developed Server 2003, I think it was. They said our new Microsoft Server is very stable. Previous ones, nobody would use Microsoft servers for anything very important. All the stock exchanges ran on Unix because you couldn't trust anything to really stay up except Unix. But they managed to convince the London Stock Exchange to switch to Windows. And they did, and it crashed so badly they lost all the transactions because Windows was totally not ready for it. So they had to roll back to Linux, and they did roll the entire London Stock Exchange back 3 days and have a do-over. So the real money of dollars and pounds and yen and stuff, if you want to call that stuff real, has also had the same kind of bogus manipulations happen as the cryptocurrencies. So anyway, it is the financial market. That's why some people say you should just go back to gold. When you had gold, you knew you had something. All these other currencies are pretty much just sort of virtual imaginary things. But all modern economists agree that going back to gold standard would not make anything any better. But it is very strange how our monies all sort of float with no clear value. Anyway, so they talked, this is the white. So then what happened is after the black hat hackers stole half the money in the DAO, the people running the Ethereum blockchain were not inclined to roll back the blockchain because they said, it said right here, we only provide the blockchain. We do not have anything to do with the contracts that you write to run on the blockchain. If you make a mistake, that is not our problem. And we will not roll back the sacred Ethereum blockchain just because your contract failed. But in order to force them to run back, after the black hat hackers stole half the money, white hat hackers stole all the rest of the money in order to pressure Ethereum into rolling it back. So they're committing a crime, if you want to look at it that way, that is just as bad as what the other one did, but they see themselves as like political protesters exerting enough pressure to undo all the damage. But the damage didn't really get undone because both blockchains went forward. And by the way, if you want to talk about crime, it's not clear at all that any law was broken. And if you wanted to prosecute them, what court would have jurisdiction? What nation did it take place in? It's kind of madness. Although the US courts ruled that the Americans who actually wrote the software are still liable and can be sued, even though they tried to imagine that they'd somehow released it onto the internet and it wasn't anywhere. The American courts did not take that position. But anyway, so that's the game. He stole a bunch of money and a bunch of other ones got hacked the same way. So there's a lot of ways to do this. And biggest hack in history, hit parity. A lot of people publish blockchain products and claim they're secure, and then they almost invariably get hacked right away. And on it goes. So cryptocurrencies are pretty much madness. They're the most common application of blockchains, but they serve no purpose except fraud and every kind of fraud, primarily pump and dump fraud, price manipulation fraud of other kinds, and Ponzi schemes. Almost all the blockchain investments are crooked and people lose their money. However, you could use a blockchain for other purposes in principle. And this is what a lot of people have done. They want to get programmers that understand this to write blockchains for business. And a lot of people have been developing it, hiring people for it, developing versions of it. It's one of those fashionable technologies like robotics, blockchain, Bitcoin. Now it's AI. These are the buzzwords that people like. So the point of this is you can have a group of people involved in it. They each have a copy of the ledger and they can't lie or cheat about what happened. So Microsoft has their blockchain framework. They will lease you Azure machines that will run a blockchain. It's a service on Azure. NASDAQ is developing one called Link. And Santander, the main bank of Spain, is making a blockchain for international money transfers. The Sydney Stock Exchange is developing one. As China just announced one last month. And so it's, we've talked about how Bitcoin works well enough, I think. The point of Bitcoin was sort of a proof of concept to show that the blockchain worked. And Bitcoin blockchain did work in the sense that the people that have Bitcoins, it doesn't forget who owns them. It preserves that information. It was started in 2009 by an unknown person who called himself Satoshi Nakamoto. This person has never stepped forward. They have billions of dollars worth of Bitcoins and they never claimed them. This is actually not a very encouraging thing when the originator cannot, for any amount of money, even step up and admit what they did. And used a fake name. But this is called a Merkle tree. Merkle is the computer scientist that invented this system where you have a hash and you include the hash value in the next block and you include that hash value in the next block. So verifying one block at the end is enough to prove that the entire tree of data is correct. All right, so we've already talked about how this works. You have a Genesis block. The original Genesis block of the blockchain has a place to put a comment, and this is the comment. It is a headline from the London Times on when they had the bank bailout, when there was the financial crisis of 2008. And over here, we had a program called TARP that Obama had that printed about a big pile of money and just let the bank steal it. They did the same thing in London, and that made somebody so angry that they created Bitcoin. They said, we need to have currency where no government can ever have a bank bailout or anything like that because that's manipulating the currency and it shouldn't be that way. So Bitcoin was a digital currency to act sort of like gold, where you couldn't print more arbitrarily. But it had some problems. The block size was fixed, and Bitcoin in 2017 hit the limit of its block size. So there was a huge argument about whether to increase the block size. They couldn't fit any more transactions in the blocks. And yet a good part of miners did not want to change it because they had huge investments in hardware miners that couldn't handle the bigger block size. So again, it forked. There is Bitcoin Classic and another Bitcoin with a bigger clock size. So there's actually 4 different kinds of Bitcoin from forks, where people have made big changes like that, and they go forward with different names. So anyway, then they move forward independently. And there turn out to be a lot of cryptocurrencies. This, by the way, leads to another subtle security problem. Remember, the security of Bitcoin relies upon the fastest computers on Earth doing honest mining instead of cheating. But now there's 4 different kinds of Bitcoin, 2 different kinds of Ethereum, and hundreds of other things like Litecoin and Dogecoin. Well, how can they all be secure? And the answer is they are not. If you're mining Bitcoin, you might be the number 10 miner of Bitcoin. But if you take that equipment and mine one of the lesser coins, you'll be faster than everybody. So you can perform 51% attacks against those smaller coins. And it must be because the security relies on you having the fastest computer in the world doing your mining, then nobody else can have the fastest computer in the world on your network. So fundamentally, proof of work only works if there is only one coin. And one of the many reasons why this is all sort of madness. Anyway, that's why there's a group of people called Bitcoin purists that say all the rest should just shut up. Everything should just be one Bitcoin. And there's a certain logic to that, but that's not what happened. There are hundreds of them. IOTA is one that was designed to run on small portable devices with small CPUs and small memory. And the idea was you could use it to make micropayments. If you wanted to put a temperature sensor outside your house, somebody could offer you, you'll put up a temperature sensor and I'll pay you like 3 cents a day for that. And it'll do a little bit of mining on that and move the money to you. And there's the Brave browser, where you actually get paid by viewing ads. If you don't block the ads, you get paid in some cryptocurrency. So cryptocurrencies could be used for micropayments like that. And that's what IOTA was designed for. Unfortunately, IOTA was based on really bad cryptography. They decided, for no apparent reason, to try to switch to a new kind of math that uses 3 values for a bit instead of 2. And then they invented some new hash function claiming it would be quantum resistant. And like I say, never make up your own cryptography. Both of those were completely messed up and turned out to have terrible mathematical properties and make a lot of trouble for IOTA. And when people started pointing out that their cryptography was no good, they just sort of lied and cheated and tried to defame the researchers and stuff, rather than admitting there was a problem and updating it in a reasonable way. I actually bought some IOTA. I owned a little bit of cryptocurrency. I don't know what happened to it. I should find out, but probably nothing good. Anyway, because I like the idea. It actually made some sense for use case, but the implementation was all messed up. Anyway, and then there's blockchain voting, right? Voting would seem like something where you might want a record that can't be altered so you can go back and count the votes. So you have, I made a blockchain voting project years ago. And so every stakeholder could run their miners, and they have the whole blockchain. So each political candidate, each party, each district could add it up themselves and make sure it's right. And so I made one. I made a cloud voting, blockchain voting prototype in 2016 when this election happened of Hillary versus Trump. And I got up to about 100 votes and Trump won. And I shut it down and said, well, that can't be right, because you may not remember, all of us were sure Hillary was going to win. But I got the result that Trump won in this blockchain for what it was worth. I don't think it was very scientific, but it was an interesting experiment in making blockchains. And then I made, I used this blockchain called Multichain, which is a nice one from Europe. And you can send up your data and it goes on there. Anyway, there's other groups out there making real blockchain voting projects, and they're mostly all crooks. They lie, they claim anytime you see anybody that claims their product is 100% secure, they're crooks. Nothing is 100% secure. There is no perfect security anywhere. Here's a site listing the cost, of the various networks. Let's see, that's good. Yeah, here's one, I've seen this, the 51% attack cost, there you go. This shows you how much it would take to forge the various blockchains. Of course, it's very hard to forge Bitcoin, but all the rest, for a few $100, you could in principle, beat everybody for a while. It's a good point. Yeah. Anyway, so, all right. And so CryptoKitties was the big popular activity on the Ethereum blockchain. They made these digital kitties. They were just little cartoons, but you could own them, you could trade them, and you could breed them. And they became incredibly popular. And people started selling them for thousands of dollars. And what happened is, it caught on, and over a few weeks, it got really popular and the price went way up. And then the chain crashed, so you couldn't sell them. And so I got a couple of them. I paid a few bucks to buy a few kitties, and I started giving them away to students as prizes. And when I gave this talk at a place, I gave a contest at the end, and I awarded the prize to someone. And when I gave it to them, they did not get it because the whole blockchain was frozen and you couldn't do any transactions. So what CryptoKitties proved is that Ethereum is garbage. It cannot actually handle enough transactions per second to run anything that has any large number of users. All you can do is rip people off. All you can do is have an idea, make a prototype, and show your prototype go from 0 up to 1% really fast and collect more investors, and then run and hide, because when it tries to go up to 10% and 50%, it's just going to crash and not work anymore. It's all a scam. And yet an incredible number of people are developing it. So anyway, I've got a Kahoot we can do here, and then I'll talk about some projects where you can do this stuff. So let me bring up the Kahoots, which are here. It's worth extra credit if you get the most of these right. And there it is. And I'm not going to bother trying to send you a CryptoKitty as a prize, though, but you will get some points. So go to kahoot.it and put in that number, and I'll set up a page to record the scores on. This is CNET 141, August 20. Good. Let's see, we've got 26 people or so, all right, we might get up to 15 or 20 there. All right, I see 15. I think I better wait a few more seconds. Enough time to figure out the music. There we are. All right, 14, maybe that's, oh, here they come, yep. I'll give it a little while yet. All right, I guess 10 more seconds. Okay, I'll wait a little longer. People still coming in. All right, let me try 10 seconds from here. Nope, they're still coming. Okay. All right, I'll try 10 seconds from here. All right, I think we got everybody that's coming. Okay. All right, so which exchange lost 7% of all the Bitcoins? That was Mt. Gox, which, by the way, was not a mountain. This was Magic the Gathering online exchange. He bought the domain name, and when he made his Bitcoin exchange, he was so broke he couldn't even afford to buy another domain name, so he repurposed an old domain name, and it became the #1 exchange handling hundreds of millions of dollars. And this is a lot of why the financial professionals said, you guys are idiots. You hand your money over to weird people like this, and then you wonder why it all just gets stolen. Anyway. All right, what ensures the integrity? Yep, just mathematics. And that's the point. Other banks depend on governments, companies and governments. You have to trust them. And people who are very, very cynical and feel like those guys are not trustworthy, they imagine that trusting computers and mathematics would be better. But the fundamental lesson is you always end up trusting somebody. And they can all stab, there's always somebody who can stab you in the back. Anyway. All right. So here's another one. All right, how many nations would have to work together to exploit Bitcoin? That's the problem. The whole idea was you were getting away from trusting a nation, but now what's really happening is we're all trusting China, which is certainly not what people imagined they were creating when they created Bitcoin. All right, which cryptocurrency was designed to run on low-power devices? That's IOTA. All right. And when will Bitcoin consume all the power in the world? All right, and that of course will never happen. For a while people thought it would because they're just being silly. And which currency runs smart contracts? All right, and that's Ethereum. All right, good. So let's see who the winners are. Erica, that looks like a real name. And Leighton's a real name. Good. Ah, these are all real names. Good. All right, good. All right, so I've got that. So let me just point out a couple projects you can do. All right, so if you want to get started on your project, which I highly recommend, then you can start doing the usual math here and read the first chapter. There's a quiz. I should explain this here. The quizzes start being due next week, and you should introduce yourself on the discussion board. But this asterisk means I won't take points off for being late until after the add date is over, because some people will be adding, and we might as well not have them start off already late. But if you want to be keeping up with things, you should start doing this by next week. So get the book and read the first chapter, take the first quiz by next week is what I recommend. And if you want to start doing projects, they're not due until the second week, but you could get going. So you can start with the real cryptography projects where you start doing simple cryptography, or you can do this extra credit blockchain stuff if you like, if you're interested in blockchains. And so those are, this one here we already talked about, where you use this simple simulation. There are a couple of more blockchain projects here. And so for the next one, you actually set up a blockchain. For that, you need a Linux server. So if you have a local Linux virtual machine, or that's fine. But if you don't, you can make a Google Cloud Linux server for free and use that. And then you can set up a blockchain. And this is worth mentioning. This is the Linux server. You already got that one. I want the Hyperledger. Okay. IBM has jumped into blockchain in a really big way. They have created a whole suite of products for blockchains and called the Hyperledger system. And there's just a whole bunch of parts to it. This is like Microsoft domain controllers with cross-forest trusts and everything else. So all these different blockchain products are coming from IBM, and the cheapest and simplest is Iroha. So this project, you set up an iRoha blockchain, which is like IOTA. It's intended for mobile devices, so it's very simple. So you install this thing in Docker, you run the database in PostgreSQL, and you create a block store, and then you can start sending transactions. You have a little menu, you can make a new transaction, so you can create an asset called Cool Coin and issue some assets, and then you can move them from one account to another, and you can view the blockchain and see how it works. So you get a little bit of practice of how these blockchains really look in practice. All right, and I see a message asking for an ad code. There are no ad codes. We haven't used them in years. You just add the course. And if it says you, I might be that I have to approve you, but I think not. I think you're in the ad period and the course is not full. I think you can just add it. You don't need an ad code. Let me know if you can't, but people have not needed those for a while. And the last one I thought I'd mention is really a lot of fun. This is where you do one of the Bitcoin thefts or one of the cryptocurrency thefts. POWH coin was a coin made as a joke by people on 4chan. They said, let's make a Ponzi scheme. So they made an Ethereum smart contract and they deployed it, and people put almost $1 million in it, and it all got stolen because there was a bug in the code. And you can do it in this thing called Remix. Remix runs a simulated Ethereum blockchain in your browser on JavaScript. So you don't need any real money, and you don't need to really be connected to the blockchain, and you can deploy real contracts and run them locally. So it's very good. It's a wonderful learning tool and a developer's tool. So you just open the website, you import the source code. The entire product here is only 306 lines of source code. And this language that looks like JavaScript is called Solidity. It's the language for writing Ethereum blockchains. And so you copy in this code and run it, then you compile the contract, then you deploy the contract. So the contract is now running on this simulated blockchain, and the blockchain gives you some accounts. You have 10 or 15 accounts, each with 100 Ether. Ether is like Bitcoin, it's the cryptocurrency of Ethereum. And now they can deploy that money into the blockchain. So you can invest into here's the contract. You have a series of account numbers, each with 100 Ether to start out with. And then you can fund the Ponzi token contract. You go down here and you can fund it so somebody can put 50 Ethers in there. And so you put in 50 Ether, and after that, the first account is almost down to 50 instead of 100 Ether. There's a little bit more spent because every time you do a transaction in Ethereum, you have to pay a little bit of a fee, and that's called the gas. And it's this tiny fraction of an Ether here. So then you have another investor that joins it and invests 1 Ether. And the point is there's a bug in the code where you can move money from one account to another, and it accidentally subtracts the money from the wrong account. So you can end up subtracting from an account that has a balance of 0. And the code is also so stupid that when that happens, it has an integer underflow, and it turns into the largest positive value, which is 2 to the 256 minus 1. So you can make an empty account turn into an account with an essentially infinite amount of money, and that's the hack. With a single transaction, you can end up stealing all the money, and that's what somebody did. And it's kind of fun, and we can reproduce the exact attack here because this is another bit of madness. If you do a crime on a blockchain, there is a permanent record of everything you did that everybody can see. That's the whole nature of it. So that's why people have gone into anonymous blockchains like Zcash that keep shuffling the account numbers and cryptographically hiding them to try to make it harder for people to track. And there are companies that just de-anonymize the blockchains now for due diligence for companies and for law enforcement and so on. They will keep track of the Ethereum and Bitcoin blockchains and the other blockchains and try to keep track of things. People shuffle things around between accounts to try to hide their money. And so there's now a whole business of undoing that. But in this case, the fact that there's a blockchain record means they know exactly what caused the problem and exactly how they did the hack, so you can reproduce it. So anyway, and again, you end up with some flags to turn in to prove that you've done it. So those are the blockchain projects. And next time I'll go through the first chapter and we'll start doing the usual cryptography like Caesar cipher and the one-time pad and the two-time pad. And then we'll get up to the modern techniques like AES and RSA. and start doing attacks on them. So that gets us off to a start here. So I'm going to stop the recording and post it up, but I'll leave the share going for a while to answer any questions.